Peace.
Peace. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, so I was just saying with the 9 ethnic groups, there are some that are Muslim, some that are Christian, and then specifically Kunama, which is a traditional African practice.
Just real quick, I just want to say to all of our listeners, we're talking about the country of Eritrea, which is in East Africa, and the 9 ethnic groups that make up Eritrea. And this is KUNAMA NIGARITE.
Yeah. So, during the liberation movement, or I guess that started with the colonization of East Africa, one of the strategies that Western European nations, and specifically the English, were using to divide and conquer the people is that they would, identify like the characteristics or the different aspects of the cultures or the ethnic groups or tribes, and then they would try to use that to pin them against each other. So with Eritrea, one of the things that the British tried to use is that they said all the Muslims, they were going to go with the country of Sudan, and all the Christians, they were going to go with the country of Ethiopia. And so you have Kunama, which is an indigenous African spirituality system practicing community. And so Kunama people actually, because of how the Europeans drew the borders, so you have Kunama on the Ethiopian side and you have Kunama on the Eritrean side. The same with like the Muslim, which like Tigray or Harandoa, which are on the side of Sudan and on the side of Eritrea. So when they were trying to basically, divide and conquer the people, some of our leaders, specifically Abu Walda Mariam, who was kind of like by default became the leader of the Christians, and Abu Ibrahim Sultan, who became the leader of the Muslims, they said, no, we are one nation, we're one people before any religion or politics, and we're not going to let, these European colonizers divide and conquer us. So the 9 ethnic groups came together, and so that was really, really crucial to the liberation movement and its victory. Wow. So I was saying earlier that Assad was asking which ethnic groups are Christian or Muslim. And keep in mind the 30 years of liberation movement and uniting, unity or Umoja was very, very, very essential to our victory. So in that unity, there's, mixed marriages. So you have children that are a product of like all the liberation movement, fighters or the freedom fighters. They really wanted to squash anything that was like contributing to the people dividing and becoming like vulnerable. Exactly. So during that liberation movement, a lot of our tribes also intermarried. But initially, like the Tigrinya, which is the biggest ethnic group, is mainly Christian, and within that, there are denominations. But the majority of the Tigrinya people are Coptic Orthodox Christian practitioners, and so Coptic is actually one of the most ancient or the oldest Christian known in the world. And so Coptic is practiced in Egypt, in Ethiopia, in Eritrea, in Sudan, and people don't know this, but I lived in Sudan for 4 years, so I know the Coptic Christian community is large and strong in Sudan. Also in some, across the border as well, like Yemen or even Eastern European nations have that Coptic Orthodox tradition as well. So Tigrinya mostly Christian, the largest population being Coptic Christian, but also Lutheran and the Catholic. After the Italian colonization, some of our people also converted to Catholicism. So the Bilen ethnic group is known mostly for practicing Catholic. Okay. Now with the Bilen, like when you look at their attires, their traditional attires, they might be very similar to the Tigre, which
Right.
is Muslim practicing, but like so then their practice mainly is Catholic. Um, so and then you have the Tigre and Rashaida and Harendawa and Afar and Saho. Saho are actually some Christian and some Muslim as well. Uh, but mainly Muslim. And then you have the Kunama, who are indigenous African practitioners.
Right.
So it's
So that's what's that? 7 right there. That's 7. You just named about 7 of them or 6 of them. You said
okay. So Baza or Nara is also
okay.
so Nara is like mainly like Kunama, but also like you have to understand too with these ethnic groups and how they evolved. Each one has a little bit of the other,
Right,
except for like Kunama, which is the most indigenous, and then so you have the Hamites and the Semites mixing. So some of the ethnic groups are a mixture of the Semites and Hamites. So the Kunama are Hamites, which are like indigenous African, and you have to keep in mind that Eritrea is right on the coast of the Red Sea.
Right.
It's the home of like the first Wall Street in the world. There used to be a market right on the coast of the Red Sea called Adolis. And Adolis is
Right,
where the first coins in the world were seen.
Yeah,
So if
I've
you
heard
could
a lot
think
about
of the
Adolis.
world having to trade for spices, having to trade for minerals and different things that were only found in the continent of Africa, and Eritrea and where it is, and the Red Sea being like the gateway to the rest of Africa, that's where the world market was. So people came from all over the world,
Gotcha.
so then of course it's only human nature to like have just if you could think the makeup of these ethnic groups and that genetic.
It's like a
It's
mixture
like-
of like the world's people.
Yeah.
Real quick though, can you just name off all 9 of the ethnic groups?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have Kunama,
1,
you have Nara,
2,
you have Hadarit,
3,
you have Rashaida,
4,
you have Tigre,
5,
you have Bilan,
6,
you have Afar,
7,
you have Saho,
8,
and you have Tigrinya.
9. And the reason why I really like that model is because I've seen a lot of other African countries, and you have to make plans for after liberation, and one thing people don't do, they don't look at all the cultural divisions and then build that into their future plans on how they're going to break down those cultural divisions. So what happens is that they leave some stuff in their country that people can come in and use to divide them, like cultural differences and whatnot, and then the tribalism begins all over again, and then you have 10 million coups and whatnot. And I think, a lot of the rest of Africa could learn from Eritrea's, demonstration as far as not taking money from the UN. They're not in debt to the IMF, and they've brought together and squashed the tribalism using unity and, Pan-Africanism. And that's something that works against micro-nationalism. So that was really amazing how that was done, and put everybody, all the different groups in their proper perspective, Didn't try to force anybody into anything, but everybody's still a part of that collective of 9,
Yeah, and
You see.
this is still very, very prominent in how the nation continues to evolve and grow.
Yeah.
So during the liberation movement, we have what were called the Eritrean Children Liberation Schools, or also known Betimriti Sora. And so Sora is the front, right? The word for
Gotcha.
front is Sora. And because we were like, so the whole liberation movement was the movement of the people.
Right.
So there was, as children, we were taught, you learn, you work, and you serve. And service is really, really essential to your development as a human being. That's why we exist, period. Otherwise, we don't feel significant. Otherwise, we don't feel fulfilled.
It's like a civic
service
duty
is
kind of
not
thing.
something you do
Right.
for a favor of some entity or some organization. And favor is also service is not something you do to build your resume or
Indeed.
for personal gains,
Right.
meaning monetary gains. It's something you do for like um, you know, in Tigrinya we say "Na manfas agbat." Manfas is spirit, right? Agbat is contentment or satisfaction. So when we do service, we do it with eagerness and joy because
Right.
it gives us spiritual satisfaction, spiritual contentment, because it's like we are completing ourselves in
Right.
that in our
Right.
development. So in Beta Minnesota, we we weren't just students, but we learned, and there were also the way, because it was a community school, each one of us was able and supported to really explore our talents. What are you best at in,
Right.
and then you use that to serve your community. So even because I was not able to participate in Beta Minnesota at home, like in Eritrea, because when I was in kindergarten and we had our liberation school, which was actually held in my uncle's house, and I didn't even finish kindergarten. The bombardment got so bad, and our liberation movement had to retrieve to the mountains of Sahel. That's a whole different story. And so our school was dismantled. So then I didn't go back to being in that environment until my family had to flee 6 years later to Sudan, and then all of a sudden we were refugees. So what happened in the refugee camp is you're like in the middle of nowhere, and makeshift community, but the the freedom fighters that were physically disabled that had come to Sudan for medical care, and once they recovered, they basically formed these liberation schools for us, for the children, the refugee children, and so there we learned our language. We learned, it was a school where you really learned about what is the struggle about, and like what does unity of 9 ethnic groups mean, and what are those 9 ethnic groups, and how do you relate to them. So that gave us like a really genuine and organic way of not just learning about our history and our national unity, but also this sense of like family.
Yeah.
Because now,
And it
all
seemed
of a
like it was
sudden-
like a build and destroy thing, because they were destroying the micro nationalism
Yes.
while at the same
Yeah.
time building the national a
Yeah.
new identity
Yeah.
simultaneously.
Exactly. So we became the teachers to our parents, really,
Wow.
because at home I'm Tigrinya, right? I only spoke Tigrinya, and my mom gave me all the history, and because it was like a culture of oral tradition, we got the history and the and the information through storytelling. So that became like one of my favorite things. So history is my favorite subject, and the way that I love to teach history is in conversation, not giving you reading assignment and giving you a test or a quiz, but like having a conversation.
It's like we
So
doing
then
now.
at home we had that, and I remember even when we were in Eritrea under the bombardment of the Ethiopian military. Now I don't say Ethiopia because Ethiopia is a nation of many ethnic groups and many different cultures that were also being brutalized and being going through it just like my family was going through it. So I was not a victim of Ethiopia. I was a victim of the Derg administration, which was an Ethiopian military administration. I just want to be clear about that.
And he was empowered by who? Who was it that put Mr. Derg in power? Who armed Mr. Derg?
It depended, on like how he was, like how the relationship was going, but it was,
because we know there had to be some European powers that benefited from
Western
having him.
power,
Because we didn't benefit from Mr. Derg. We didn't get nothing out of him.
No, we didn't. Ethiopia, all Ethiopian people were brutalized.
Yeah.
And still recovering from that.
Right.
So it was either the United States military or government, or it was the Russian government. So, based on where their relationships was, they went back and forth. Because now, remember what I said about the Red Sea and the coast.
Right.
It's an ancient, prominent gateway to the rest of Africa. So these two superpowers, the Russians and the United States were going back and forth because they wanted to gain favor from Mengistu Haile Mariam.
So he was playing them
the
both
leader of
against
the-
each other, kind of. Okay.
Right, so he
if you
was-
guys don't give it to me, I'm gonna go to these guys and get it.
Exactly. He just went with whoever was offering
Wow.
the highest, tech and the newest and baddest tech.
Wow.
And so when we talk about the Cold War between the Russians and the United States, it was not cold at all in East Africa. Everything was burning.
Wow.
Our homes, our schools, our churches, our mosques, our farms, our waters, everything was burning.
Wow. But, when I listen to the story, and I'm going to try to wrap it up here, it seems like there was a beginning identity, which was a weaker identity that could be compromised, but through struggle forged a new, greater, larger, more encompassing identity, a redefining, bringing it up to date, the ancient greatness, bringing it up to date and bringing all the 9 together for one common cause, so, sometimes in struggle, some stuff has to be destroyed in order for some new stuff to be built, so,
Yeah.
I definitely can appreciate that aspect of it, and I know a lot of people passed away, but it's also just like out of the Crips and the Bloods, having a lot of fights and stuff and seeing the error in their ways. Now there's a new unity that's forging out of Los Angeles,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard you say in different ciphers that we are stronger united than we are by ourselves. You know.
Yeah.
We are more powerful collectively than we are individually, and our enemies know this. That's why they have relentless, endless, persistent plans and systems in place to assure that our unity and our collective conscience is prevented
Indeed.
and dismantled. But we also have proved over and over and over again that the African spirit is resilient and it always shines through
Indeed.
everything against all odds. By the way, there are 2 books that are very, very helpful in understanding the Eritrean struggle.
Y'all take your pen and your paper out.
Okay, so one of them is called Even the Stones Are Burning. And this speaks to what I was saying earlier, how everything was burning in East Africa when it was called the Cold War. And this was written by an American professor.
Wow.
The other one is called Against All Odds. Because the Eritrean Liberation Movement, like I said, was facing a nation or a military of a nation that was 14 times its size, supported by the most powerful powers in the world, the US and Russia. But we won victory. It took 30 years, but we were victorious. So Against All Odds. And that was also written by another American. He was actually a journalist that went to the field, that sat with the liberation freedom fighters. He visited the underground schools and hospitals. We'll talk about.
Did he write the Time magazine article? Was that the guy where they got?
He is, I think he still is a journalist. He's an American journalist. His name was Don Connell.
Don Connell.
And he wrote.
Y'all look
Against All
him
Odds.
up.
He
One
might
more
have
time.
written
The
might
article.
have written the article
Yeah.
in the Times. Yeah.
So one more time, can you give us the 9 ethnic groups just for our watchers and listeners? We love y'all. Go ahead.
Kunama.
Kunama.
I don't know if I said them the same order earlier. I know I said Kunama first,
Okay.
but Kunama,
Kunama.
Nara,
Nada.
Rashaida,
Rashida.
Hedarib,
Henarib.
Saho,
Saho.
Afar,
Afar.
Tigray,
Tigray.
Bilan,
Bilan.
Tigrinya.
Tigrinya. From knowledge to born, y'all. The 9 ethnic groups of Eritrea. If you only seen one, now you seen them all. This is KUNAMA NIGARITE. And we're going to say, peace.